The day my husband died, my son stood in the corner of the funeral home, leaning against the wall like it was any other Sunday afternoon. He wasn't grieving. His eyes were dry. His tie was loose. He didn't even pretend to mourn. I stood near the casket, quietly watching the people file in and out, offering shallow condolences. Most didn't even know Harold that well, but they came for the free food, for the gossip, for the will, and then I heard him. Thank God he passed away, my son Eric whispered to his wife, thinking I couldn't hear. Now the inheritance will be mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't look in his direction. I just smiled, faintly, and kept my eyes on the flowers next to the casket. Tulips. Harold hated tulips. They were his mother's favorite. She was the one who insisted we use them at our wedding, and now here they were again, wrapping up his story with a neat little bow. Eric didn't even wait until the burial to start asking about the house. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. So, Mom, he said casually, during the reception in our backyard. What are your plans now that Dad's gone? I mean, with the house and all? It's a lot for someone your age. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he expected me to hand over the keys. I haven't thought about it yet, I answered, knowing perfectly well I had. Right, he nodded. Well, no pressure. I just think it might be smart to put it on the market sooner rather than later. You know, while the prices are still up. His wife, Brittany, hovered behind him like a shadow, her long acrylic nails wrapped around a wine glass. She didn't say anything, but her smirk said enough. Harold's death had been sudden, a heart attack while trimming the hedges. He dropped right there on the lawn, his gloves still on, his pruning shears lying in the grass. We had been married for 46 years, and in the final 10, Harold had grown quieter, more tired. He didn't say it out loud, but I knew he was worried about Eric, our only son, our greatest disappointment. Eric had always wanted more than he had. He wasn't content with the life we built. He wanted fast money, big houses, luxury. Harold and I had saved for retirement, not extravagance. Eric thought that was foolish. You guys play too small, he used to say when he came around, which wasn't often. That's why you'll never have real wealth. Now, Harold was gone, and Eric was circling like a vulture. By the time the guests left that evening, Eric had already mentioned the house 4 times and the life insurance twice. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just paced around the living room, checking the windows, the roof line, the hardwood floors like he was a real estate agent. You're not gonna live here by yourself, right? He asked as he straightened a picture frame on the wall. That wouldn't make sense. I'm still thinking, I repeated, folding the last of the napkins from the buffet table. It's been 1 day. Right, he said again, already halfway to the kitchen. Just let me know when you're ready. Brittany and I could help handle the sale. We know people. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the space where Harold used to sleep. The pillow was still indented. The quilt still smelled like his aftershave. My chest ached. But the pain wasn't just grief. It was deeper. It was knowing what was coming. I knew Eric. I knew the way his mind worked. He wasn't just going to ask nicely and wait for things to happen. He was going to pressure, manipulate, push. Brittany would play her part, sweet on the outside, calculating underneath. I had seen her charm people right out of their wallets more than once. They weren't mourning, they were preparing. But what they didn't know was that I had prepared too. The next morning, Eric called. Hey, just checking in. Wanted to see how you were holding up. I could hear Brittany's voice in the background, muffled. I'm fine, I said. Listen, I was thinking, it might make sense for you to move in with us for a while. You shouldn't be alone in that big house right now. There it was, the trap disguised as kindness. I appreciate that, but I'm all right here. Mom, he sighed like I was a child who didn't understand anything. It's not safe. What if something happens to you? I'll be fine, Eric. This is my home. He was quiet for a beat. Then, well, at least let me talk to our lawyer and get things moving. There's paperwork to deal with. Taxes, property transfer. There's nothing to transfer, I said calmly. What do you mean? I mean, Harold handled everything. More silence. I knew he was trying to figure out what that meant. He didn't ask. Not yet. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the locked drawer Harold had installed years ago. The key was hidden behind the pantry door, taped inside a light switch cover. Eric had never known about it. Inside the drawer was a manila envelope, thick with folded pages and sealed with a red sticker. Harold's handwriting was on the front. To be opened only if Eric becomes what we fear he might. I had read it the night he died. Every word, every detail. It was a second will, a private one, signed, notarized, and filed with a separate lawyer, one Eric didn't know existed. Harold had transferred the house, our savings, and his retirement accounts into my name 6 months before his death, quietly, without a word to Eric. In the letter that came with the will, Harold wrote, "I love our son, but he's lost. I've tried to trust him, but I won't risk leaving you unprotected." He had always been cautious. I never thought he would go this far, but he had. I placed the envelope back in the drawer and locked it again. Then I picked up the phone and called the lawyer listed on the papers. A woman answered. Calm, firm. Margaret Lane's office. "This is Elaine Fletcher," I said. "My husband, Harold Fletcher, was your client. I found a file. He said to call if the time came." "Yes," she said. "We've been expecting you." 3 days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to Eric's house. He opened it while standing on his front porch. Brittany stood behind him, sipping coffee. I wasn't there, but I knew exactly what the letter said. It explained, in plain legal terms, that the estate was not in probate, that Harold Fletcher's assets had been legally transferred months before his death, that there would be no inheritance for Eric, no control over the house, no decisions to be made, no sales, no power. Eric would receive nothing. I don't know how long he stood there, but Margaret told me later, when Eric called her office in a panic, that his voice cracked halfway through the conversation. He asked if there had been a mistake, if he could contest it, if there was a loophole. There wasn't. I made tea that night, sat on the porch, listened to the cicadas. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was mine, fully, and I was finally ready to decide what came next. It didn't take long after Eric received the letter for his tone to change completely. 2 days passed without a single call or message. On the third morning, he showed up at my front door unannounced. No knock, just opened the screen door and walked in like he still lived there, like nothing had happened. He found me in the kitchen, rinsing off a plate. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" he said. His voice was low and flat, but his eyes were restless. "You let me stand there at the funeral talking about next steps, the house, everything, and you didn't say a word." I didn't turn off the water. I dried my hands and faced him calmly. "Because that's what your father wanted," I said. "And because I wanted to see who you'd be." Once he was gone, he let out a humorless laugh, rubbed his hand over his face, and leaned back against the counter like he was trying to collect himself. "So, that's it?" he asked. "You're just going to keep everything? You and Dad made decisions behind my back and now I'm out?" "No," I said. "We didn't do anything behind your back. Your father protected me. That's all." He didn't answer. He looked around the kitchen instead, at the cabinets, the table, the familiar walls. "You know what this looks like, right?" he said finally. "It looks like you manipulated him." That got my attention. "I took care of your father every day," I said, my voice sharper now. "I was here. You barely visited. You didn't call unless you needed something. And now, because you didn't get what you thought you deserved, you want to call it manipulation? I just think it's strange," he muttered. "No," I said. "What's strange is you assuming everything would be handed to you." He stood in the middle of the kitchen for a few more seconds, then nodded to himself, jaw clenched. "All right," he said, "if that's how you want it." He left without saying goodbye. The following week, I noticed things starting to change. First, the bank called me to verify a request to close our joint safe deposit box. I had made no such request. Then, a neighbor mentioned that Eric had stopped by to check on me, said he was making sure everything was okay after the funeral. But she told me it felt more like he was snooping, asking about how often I left the house, if I still drove, if I'd mentioned selling the place. It was obvious what he was doing. Brittany called me the next day. Her voice was syrupy sweet, like she was trying out a fake persona. Elaine, hi. I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling. It's been a rough few weeks. I'm doing all right, Brittany, I said plainly. I'm glad, she said, but her tone shifted quickly. So, listen, Eric and I have been talking, and we just feel like there's a lot to sort through with the estate, and, with the house, and there is nothing to sort through, I interrupted. Your husband received the letter. Everything is in my name. There is no estate to divide. She laughed nervously. Well, I mean, legally, sure. But morally, I repeated. You have to admit it's a bit unfair, she said. Eric is Harold's only child. It's strange that he gets nothing. I think what's strange, I said, is you two planning your windfall before the funeral was even over? She hung up a few minutes later, clearly annoyed. I didn't hear from them again for a few days. Then, the silence turned into pressure. Eric started coming by unannounced again. He'd let himself in with his old key and walk straight into the living room without asking. I confronted him the second time it happened. You don't live here, I said, holding the front door open. This isn't your home anymore. He ignored me and sat down on the couch. I have a right to visit my mother, he said. What, are you going to call the police on your own son? If you keep coming in here without permission, I said. I might. You'd really do that? You'd call the cops on me? After everything we've done for you? That part stung. Not because it was true, but because he actually believed it. Everything you've done for me? I asked. Like what? He didn't answer. The next morning, I changed the locks. When he came by later that day and couldn't get in, he banged on the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I didn't answer. I sat in the back of the house, my phone in hand, ready to dial the police if he didn't leave. After 15 minutes, he finally did, but I knew it wasn't over. The following week, I got a letter from a new lawyer, someone I didn't know. It was an informal notice, nothing official, just a warning that Eric was exploring his legal options. I called Margaret. He has no case, she said, calm as ever. Your husband's transfer was complete and fully compliant. If Eric files anything, he'll be wasting his time and money. Still, it shook me. Not because I was afraid of losing the house, but because it confirmed what I already knew. My son wasn't going to walk away. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't even ashamed. He was angry. He thought he'd been cheated. Not by the system, not by chance, by me. That weekend, Brittany posted a long message on Facebook. It was vague, but targeted. Talking about greedy parents and cold-hearted decisions and betrayals from people who claim to love you. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Her friends commented with sad emojis and outrage. Some even sent me private messages asking if I was okay, if there had been a misunderstanding. I didn't answer any of them, because I wasn't going to argue with my daughter-in-law on the internet. I was still mourning my husband, still sleeping in a room that smelled like him, still finding his socks in the laundry basket, the kind he always wore, the ones with the tiny gray heels, and my son was turning that grief into a battlefield. One afternoon, I walked out to get the mail and found Eric parked across the street in his car. He didn't wave. He didn't get out. He just stared. I walked back inside and locked the door. That night, I sat in the kitchen and opened the manila envelope again. The second will, the instructions, the letters. I reread Harold's handwriting, slow and steady. I don't want him to take advantage of you. You've given him too many chances already. This is my final one. I folded the papers, put them back in the drawer, and turned the key. I wasn't afraid. I was just tired. Eric could yell, he could post, he could threaten, he could hire as many lawyers as he wanted. But I wasn't handing over the life Harold and I built. Not because of guilt, not because of pressure, not because I owed him something. This house, this peace, it was mine, and I was going to keep it. A few days after I changed the locks, I received a small padded envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Harold's handwriting. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one we'd had since 1987, and stared at it for a few seconds. I already had the second will. I already had the deed. Everything was supposed to be settled. But this envelope felt different. Personal, not legal, not official. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded sheet of lined paper, worn at the creases. There was also a key attached to a yellow plastic tag, the kind we used to use for our basement storage bins. The note read, "Elaine, if things turn ugly after I'm gone, there's one more thing you'll need to see. It's in the lockbox behind the workshop. You'll know which one. And don't worry, I made sure it's only accessible to you. If you're reading this, it means I was right about Eric. I hope I'm not. But if I am, then please, don't let him take what we worked for. Love, Harold." I held the key in my hand and sat quietly for a long time. That evening, just before the sun went down, I walked out to the detached workshop in the backyard. Harold had built it himself 25 years ago, back when Eric was still in high school and we were fixing up furniture to sell at flea markets on the weekends. Harold always kept a cluttered workspace, a mixture of half-finished projects and rusty tools he swore still had life in them. Behind the workshop, hidden behind an old shelving unit he once built to store scrap wood, I found the lockbox. It was heavier than I expected. I carried it into the house and placed it gently on the kitchen table. Inside, there were several documents, another letter from Harold, and a flash drive taped to the bottom of the lid. The second letter was dated 2 months before his death. "Elaine, I spoke with Margaret again. She agreed that Eric's behavior raises concerns. I've been tracking some of the money he tried to borrow from our accounts. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. I've saved copies of everything here. The withdrawals, the forged emails, even the message he accidentally sent me that was meant for Brittany. It's all here. Use it only if you need to. But if you do, don't hesitate." I didn't know what made my hands shake more, the fact that Harold had documented everything, or the fact that he had never told me. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and opened the files. There were emails from Eric asking Harold to move funds into a business venture he never mentioned to me. There were PDFs of bank statements showing Harold's name being used to guarantee small loans. I had never seen these charges. I had never been informed, but they were real. There was also a saved voicemail. I clicked to play it. Eric's voice came through, low and rushed. "Dad, look, I just need access for a few days. Brittany and I are working on something. It's going to be big. We just need to shift some of the accounts around temporarily. Don't make this a big deal. I know what I'm doing." The timestamp was from 7 months before Harold died. I sat back in my chair, a hard knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just greed. It wasn't just selfishness. It was calculated, hidden. Eric had been stealing, and Harold had kept the proof. The next day, I drove to Margaret Lane's office. I hadn't told her about the lockbox yet. When I arrived, she was already waiting for me with coffee and a folder full of updates. "I assume Eric's silence means he's still weighing his options," she said. "He's not silent," I replied, placing the flash drive on her desk. "He's just careful." She looked at it, then up at me. "What is this?" Everything Harold didn't say out loud. Margaret didn't waste time. She opened the files while I sat across from her, her eyebrows raised as she read through the documents. She paused the voicemail halfway through. "This is serious," she said. "You know that, right?" "I do," she nodded. "If he takes this to court, and we respond with this, it's not just a failed claim. It could open him up to criminal charges." "I'm not trying to ruin him," I said. "I just want him to stop." Margaret leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "I understand, but this gives us a safety net. If he files something, we counter. If he tries to intimidate you, we send him a copy. You don't have to use it all now, but you can, if you need to." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I was tired. Harold had done everything he could to protect me. Even in his final months, he had been watching Eric, gathering evidence, preparing. And I had been here, setting the table for Sunday dinners, worrying that maybe I was being too harsh, too skeptical. Turns out, I wasn't skeptical enough. I went to the kitchen, heated some water for tea, and stared out the window over the sink. The porch light cast a faint glow across the yard, over the grass Harold used to mow himself every Saturday morning. For a second, I could almost see him there, pushing the mower in a straight line, wearing his old baseball cap and that faded green shirt. I closed my eyes. "I'm handling it," I whispered. "You don't have to worry." The following morning, I received a text from Eric. "I want to talk, in person, just you and me." I waited before answering. Then I typed a short reply. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Here." I didn't tell Margaret. I didn't tell anyone. At exactly 4 hours, Eric pulled into the driveway. He walked to the door, slower than usual. No arrogance in his step this time, just tension. I opened the door and let him in. He didn't sit. He stood near the dining table, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he didn't recognize it. "I didn't know Dad had moved everything," he said. "I didn't think he'd do that." "You didn't think your father would protect me?" "I thought," he paused, "I thought he'd give me a chance to prove I could manage things. Be responsible." "Eric," I said slowly, "you forged his signature. You borrowed money in his name. You sent messages behind our backs. That's not responsibility. That's theft." He looked down at the floor. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "But it did," I said. "And now you're angry because you got caught." "I'm angry because I feel like I've been cut off." "You weren't cut off," I said. "You were removed." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it again. "I don't want it to get ugly," he said quietly. "Then stop." His jaw clenched. "You'd really go through with it? Show everyone what I did?" I didn't blink. "If you push me again, I will. Your father left everything because he knew this was coming. He left it to me so I wouldn't have to fight you for it. But if you try to fight anyway, I'll finish it." Eric didn't say anything after that. He left 5 minutes later. I haven't heard from him since. The next morning, I mailed a copy of Harold's note. Not the will, not the legal papers, just the note, to Eric's address. No letter, no explanation. Just Harold's handwriting on a piece of lined paper. "I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm right, protect yourself." Dad. Let him read that. Let him sit with it. Let him understand that this wasn't just about money or property. This was about the man he used to call Dad, knowing exactly who he had become, and deciding to protect me from his own son. 3 days after Eric came to the house, I received a call from Harold's old accountant, George Whitman. George had worked with us for over 15 years. He was one of the few people Harold fully trusted with financial matters. They used to meet once a month, rain or shine, over coffee and folders filled with notes that only the two of them seemed to understand. "Elaine," George said, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to talk." I drove to his office the next morning. It was the same one he'd been in for years. Second floor of an old building on Maple Avenue, just above a hair salon and a notary public. Nothing had changed. Same green carpet, same ticking wall clock, same fake plant in the corner that hadn't been dusted in years. George looked tired. He offered me a seat, then closed the office door behind me. "I wasn't sure if I should get involved," he began, "but I saw some movement this week that concerned me. It seems your son tried to request access to one of Harold's old investment accounts. He used an outdated power of attorney document. The bank flagged it and contacted me. I wasn't surprised anymore. He's still trying," I said. "Yes. And I wanted to make sure you knew before it turned into a mess. He's using copies of documents Harold revoked years ago. I have all the updated records showing that you were assigned full control before Harold's passing. But I also wanted you to see something else." George reached into his filing cabinet and pulled out a red folder. "This is from 2 years ago," he said. "Harold asked me to keep it in case something happened to him." He placed the folder in front of me and opened it. Inside were typed notes and signed authorizations. Harold had instructed George to consolidate accounts, move certain funds, and prepare detailed summaries in the event of his death. But what stood out most was a printed list of transactions, dozens of transfers, small at first, then growing in size. "Most of these," George said, tapping the pages, "were made from the joint checking account you shared with Harold, the account that was mostly funded by your pension and Harold's retirement savings. The destination account? It was opened under Eric's name." I leaned back in my chair, my stomach tight. "And he did this while Harold was alive?" George nodded. "Yes. And at first Harold allowed small amounts. He thought he was helping, but over time it escalated. When Harold realized Eric wasn't repaying anything, he came to me. We closed that account and created new safeguards. That's when he asked me to prepare this folder." I stared at the pages, the amounts, the dates. Eric had been draining us slowly, like a leak we hadn't noticed until the floor was soaked. "I'm sorry, Elaine," George said. "I didn't know how to bring this up before, but when the bank contacted me, I figured it was time." "I'm glad you did," I said. "Thank you." Before I left, George made copies of everything for me and insisted on contacting Margaret Lane to coordinate. He promised to write a full statement outlining the financial timeline in case anything legal escalated. Later that day, I drove straight to Margaret's office with the documents in hand. She reviewed them quietly, her expression calm and professional, but I could see the shift in her posture. "This is more than enough to establish a pattern," she said. "If he pushes forward with any legal action, we'll be ready. In fact, this might be the time to take a more proactive step." "What do you mean?" Margaret leaned forward. "Right now, we're playing defense, but this," she tapped the documents, "gives us the upper hand. We could issue a formal cease and desist. Make it clear that any continued interference with your finances, property, or estate management will be met with legal consequences." I hesitated. "What happens if I don't act now?" "Then he keeps pushing," she said. "And next time, it might not be a bank. It might be a fraudulent property listing, or a false power of attorney filed in a different county. I've seen it before. You have to show him there's a line." I nodded. I was tired of being polite. Harold had prepared me for this, and now I was ready to act. The cease and desist was delivered by certified mail 3 days later. One copy to Eric's house, one to Brittany's workplace, one filed with the county court clerk for record keeping. The message was simple. Any attempt to interfere with the legal rights, assets, or personal autonomy of Elaine Fletcher will be treated as harassment and prosecuted accordingly. That night, I slept a full 8 hours for the first time in weeks. The silence didn't last long. Brittany showed up at my front door the following afternoon. No call, no warning. She was dressed neatly, makeup done, pretending everything was fine. She even brought a small box of pastries. "Thought we could talk," she said, holding the box out like a peace offering. I didn't invite her in. She stood there on the porch, blinking like she was waiting for me to play along. "I understand you're upset," she said carefully. "But this whole legal threat thing, it's unnecessary. We're family, Elaine." I crossed my arms. "Family doesn't steal. We didn't steal anything. Eric just misunderstood some of the paperwork." I didn't respond. She shifted tactics quickly. "You know, this is hurting Eric. He's not sleeping. He's stressed. He feels like you've abandoned him." "I didn't abandon anyone," I said. "He made decisions, and now he's facing the consequences." She lowered her voice. "You really want to go to court over this? You want to drag your own son through a legal fight?" "If he pushes me again," I said, "I'll do more than that." Brittany left the pastries on the porch railing and walked away without another word. I threw them out. Later that evening, Margaret called. "Just a heads up," she said. "Eric's lawyer reached out. He's backing off, for now. But don't let your guard down. These kinds of people don't just stop. They pause. They regroup." "I'm ready," I told her, and I meant it. After we hung up, I opened Harold's file one more time. In the very back of the folder, I found a handwritten note I hadn't seen before. Folded small, tucked behind the final page of the transaction list. "If Eric ever threatens you, don't hesitate. I chose you over him for a reason. Protect yourself, Elaine. He's lost his way, but you haven't." I placed the note on my desk and stared at it for a while. Harold had known. Not just about the money, not just about the lies, but about the emotional strain, the manipulation, the guilt. He'd carried it in silence, hoping it wouldn't come to this, but it had. And now it was my turn to carry it, not with silence, but with action. 2 days after Brittany came to my house, I received a message from Margaret that was short and clear. "Eric has officially withdrawn his legal petition. No further actions filed." I read it twice before putting the phone down. It should have felt like a victory, and in some ways it did. But what lingered wasn't triumph. It was exhaustion. It had been weeks of watching my son behave like a stranger, of being accused, insulted, and cornered in my own home. I had expected resistance when Harold's will surfaced, but not this level of coldness. Not from Eric. Still, I stayed alert. Harold had warned me. When Eric feels powerless, he gets reckless. And that warning was about to come true. Later that same afternoon, I walked out to check the mailbox. I hadn't gone far when I noticed my backyard gate was slightly open. We always kept it locked. Harold had installed a sliding bolt after a neighbor's dog had gotten in years ago. I approached slowly. The moment I stepped inside the yard, I saw it. Deep grooves along the side of the garage door. Someone had tried to pry it open. The outer lock was bent. The screws looked freshly disturbed. I walked closer. Inside the garage, nothing was taken. But someone had clearly been there. A box of tools had been dumped out. And a drawer from Harold's old workbench was left half open. I called the police. The officer who came was polite but brief. He walked through the yard, took a few photos, then asked if I had any idea who it might be. I didn't answer right away. He asked again. I told him I had suspicions but no proof. He left without filing a formal report, just a written incident log in case things escalated. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and began writing a list. Not a will, not instructions, just a list of things Harold and I had always agreed on. What to do if things got out of hand. What steps I should take to protect myself. I listed the locks, the passwords, the safe deposit box code. I had just finished when the phone rang. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played the message, it was Eric's voice. You think you're better than everyone, sitting in that house, acting like you earned all this. You didn't. You just got lucky. I should have been the one making the decisions. I should have been the one Dad trusted. But no, he gave it all to you. You'll regret this, Mom. I swear. I saved the recording and forwarded it to Margaret. 10 minutes later, she called me directly. I want you to document everything from now on, she said. If he shows up at your home again, don't open the door. Don't engage. Just call the police. We're beyond civil conflict now. This is harassment. I followed her instructions. I also told George, the accountant. He added a flag to all financial activity and gave me immediate access alerts. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was waiting. 3 days later, Eric made a mistake. He tried to enter a financial branch in Harold's name, one that still had an account open in a different state. The ID he used wasn't fake, but it was expired. And the teller recognized the name and remembered Harold's death announcement from weeks earlier. She flagged the transaction and reported it. That evening, Margaret called me. I just got off the phone with the bank's legal team, she said. They're not pressing charges, but they've banned Eric from all their locations. He was escorted out. I didn't ask what Eric looked like when they walked him out. I didn't care. What I cared about was that he was unraveling. Fast. The next day, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from Brittany. Subject, please. Read this. Elaine, I know things have gotten out of control. Eric is not himself. He's drinking, not sleeping, and yesterday he screamed at our daughter for dropping her tablet. I don't know what to do anymore. He's obsessed with the idea that you owe him something. He keeps saying that Harold betrayed him, that you turned Dad against him. He says that he's lost everything. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for the house. But I do need to ask you this. What should I do? Because I think he's going to do something we all regret. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I called Margaret and read the email to her. I think she's telling the truth, I said. Maybe she is, Margaret replied. But her timing is convenient. She has a child, I said. And if Eric's really losing control... Margaret didn't interrupt. I finished reading the email aloud, then closed the laptop. I'll think about it, I said. And I did. For 2 nights. On the 3rd day, I wrote Brittany back. If you feel unsafe, take your child and leave the house. I'll send you the number of a counselor who works with families in transition. I won't be getting involved directly with Eric anymore, but I won't ignore the situation if a child is in danger. Do what's right. That's all I can say. An hour later, she responded. Thank you. I've packed our bags. We're going to my sister's place in Oregon. I'll be in touch once we're settled. It was the last I heard from her for a while. The silence after Brittany left was strange. Not peaceful, just quiet, like the eye of a storm. But it didn't take long for the next wave to hit. 4 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door and handed me a letter, a formal notice. Eric had filed a motion to contest Harold's mental capacity at the time the will was updated. Margaret called me within the hour. "He doesn't have a case," she said. "Harold had medical records confirming full mental awareness. We have his signed evaluations, and George can testify to every meeting. It's a delay tactic." I sat down in the living room and read the notice again. There was a hearing date. Margaret told me she'd handle everything, that I didn't even need to appear unless I wanted to. I thought about Harold, about the workbench, the note, the quiet way he'd prepared every step so I wouldn't be overwhelmed when this day came. He knew his son better than I did, better than I wanted to. And now Eric was out of money, out of control, and out of excuses, so he went to court. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Harold had taken one final precaution, one final signature, one last truth that would come out in that courtroom, in front of a judge, with witnesses and dates and records. And when it did, Eric would lose more than just the case. The morning of the court hearing, I arrived early. Margaret met me outside the building, holding a black folder under her arm. She was calm as always, but I could tell she was ready to fight. "Eric's going to be here," she said, adjusting her jacket. "Are you sure you want to be in the room?" "I need to be," I told her. "He needs to see that I'm not afraid of him." We passed through security and sat in the hallway outside the small civil courtroom. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels too heavy for such a plain space. Eric arrived 10 minutes later, walking fast, eyes down. He looked thinner. His shirt was wrinkled. Brittany wasn't with him. He didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me, just sat at the end of the bench flipping through papers like he actually believed there was something in them that could save him. The clerk called the case, and we walked in. Eric's lawyer, a man who looked about 30 and far too inexperienced to be handling this kind of thing, stood and read a statement. It was the same tired claim, that Harold was not of sound mind when he signed the final will, that he had been coerced, that I, his wife of nearly 50 years, had manipulated him into cutting Eric out. The judge listened, nodded occasionally, then turned to Margaret. She stood, opened her folder, and began calmly. "Your Honor, my client Elaine Fletcher is the legal widow and full beneficiary of Harold Fletcher's estate. The document being challenged today was signed 6 months before Mr. Fletcher's death and was prepared with full legal oversight. I have notarized witness statements, video documentation of the signing, and 2 medical evaluations performed within a month of the will's execution, confirming his cognitive health." Margaret placed a flash drive on the table. "Included here is a recording of Mr. Fletcher reading the will aloud, dated and time-stamped, witnessed by George Whitman, Harold Fletcher's longtime financial advisor, and notarized by a licensed official." The judge asked to see the documents. We all sat in silence as the files were reviewed. Eric looked uncomfortable but still tried to act confident. But I could see the difference in him now. There was no control left, no plan. He was grasping. After 15 minutes, the judge looked up. "Everything here is in order. The claim of diminished capacity is unfounded. I see no reason for this case to proceed to trial." Eric's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, we request an extension to submit additional evidence." The judge raised his hand. "No, you've had 6 weeks to prepare. The documentation is clear. The will stands." Eric didn't speak. He didn't argue. He just sat there, his eyes on the floor, face pale. The gavel came down. It was over. We left the courtroom without a word to him. Outside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Quiet, real quiet, not the tense kind, not the kind you sit through, waiting for the next blow, but a final kind of quiet, a stillness. That evening, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea and the folder Margaret had given back to me. I opened it, page by page, and reviewed every step, every paper Harold had signed, every safeguard he had built. At the very back was a small envelope. Margaret had marked it as personal, not submitted. I opened it. Inside was a letter from Harold, dated almost a year before his death. "Elaine, if this letter is in your hands, it means everything worked as I hoped. I know Eric. I know he'll feel entitled. But I also know you. You'll stand firm. You'll protect what we built. I didn't leave you this life because I was angry at him. I left it to you because you were the one who stayed. The one who worked beside me. The one who never asked for more than what we had. Thank you for carrying the weight. I'm sorry you had to fight him. But now, you don't have to fight anymore. Harold. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer with the others. A week later, I received a call from Brittany. She had settled in Oregon with her daughter. She didn't ask for help. She didn't try to excuse Eric's behavior. She only said one thing. He's gone. I don't know where, but we're safe now. I wished her well and hung up. That night, I made a decision. The house was mine. The money was secure. But I didn't want to live the rest of my life walking from room to room thinking about what Eric had done, about how close I came to losing everything. So the next morning, I called a real estate agent, not to sell the house, but to rent it. 2 weeks later, I packed my bags and moved into a small seaside town 3 hours away. Quiet, clean, peaceful. A modest one-story house near the pier, where the breeze was always moving and the faces were always new. I didn't tell Eric where I went. I didn't give him a forwarding address. I didn't leave a door open. Because some things, some people, you have to leave behind to find peace. And I finally had mine.